So tonight's reading is about pop versus folk culture. Um, and so let's go over some of the differences. So when we look at pop versus folk culture, they have different origins or different births. So when we look at folk culture, the origin is anonymous. So you might have multiple hers that each originated independently and they all kind of come together. You don't know who began folk culture. You don't know exactly when. Um, you don't know who the original group was. And so you're looking at like really the either like indigenous culture or culture that's endemic to an area, practices that are endemic to a group of people. And so these practices are part of their culture, but we don't know exactly who began these practices. Popular culture is usually produced by a developed country, typically North America or Europe, and you can usually trace the origins of pop culture to either an individual or to a corporation or to a group of people or to a place. Um, so if you look at the diffusion of folk culture is going to move usually through relocation diffusion because of migration. It's going to be smaller and it's going to move slower from one place to another as people move. Popular culture tends to be transmitted through hierarchical diffusion, so expansion diffusion, and it's going to move through hierarchical diffusion and then maybe even later through contagious diffusion. It's popular and it moves fast. So if you're looking at like music types, the origin of like blues music is we don't know who invented it. We know that it came from a mix of many different cultures. Primarily, it had a lot to do with um, its origins in the United States in songs that slaves and then sharecroppers would sing in the South. And then, that was mixed with, other American folk music types. And that spread and changed into jazz music in the 1920s. But you don't know, like, the one person who invented blues. You might know one person who sings blues really well. But the origin of American blues music is really, it's cloudy and has to do with people moving and adopting different cultures through relocation diffusion. But if you look at later, a music type that was strongly influenced by the blues and many other types of American music, like hip hop, right? Hip hop is popular culture. You know exactly where it started. It started in Brooklyn. We know it started with Grandmaster Flash. So we can really point to where it began. And we know that it was transmitted through hierarchical diffusion. Folk culture is going to be usually isolated from other cultures because of physical barriers and is often influenced by religion. And so if you're practicing a folk culture still, it's probably because you were like physically separated from another place. So you might have so like the music sung in the Appalachian Mountains is different than the music that would have been played in the Great Plains of the United States. They were separated from each other by these physical barriers, and until recently, that would have made it much more difficult to transmit information. Popular culture is widely distributed across many countries, and it doesn't really matter. The physical properties don't matter so much. So because today you can buy it in the store, see it online, watch it on television. It allows you to distribute materials much more just faster. When we look at music, folk music is going to originate anonymously. It's transmitted orally. So you're singing the songs out loud. You're teaching them to your kids, or your kids learn them because you're singing them. And there are changes made over generations as people hear them, remember them differently. Folk music tends to center on events in daily life. So life cycle events like birth, death, or marriage, or environmental features like when do you plant something, when do you move, so agriculture and climate. And again, like all of folk culture, migration of people is what diffuses the music. Pop music is written by individuals, and they're writing music with the intent of being sold or being performed in front of a paying audience. So if you're making popular music, you're not doing it to just pass the time. You're not doing it to kind of teach someone, like, you're not celebrating a life event with it. That's not your goal. You're not like, I'm going to write this song so when people get married, they have the song to hear. I'm going to write this song so people know the best time of year to plant corn. You're doing it with the intent to perform. And usually musicians have strong connections with other musicians, and this might be globally. We also have pop versus folk sports. So, like soccer would have originated as a folk sport in England in the 11th century, and then it transformed from folk to popular sports in the 1800s when they made organized clubs. Then they had professional players, and so they really went from a small folk sport to a large popular sport. And today, soccer is played across the world. We have the other folk and popular material culture items, including your food, clothing, and your shelter. So there are foods that are endemic to different regions, and there are traditional foods, and those would be examples of folk food. And then you have your popular culture food, and that's things like McDonald's and Starbucks and, Gatorade, vitamin water, Oreo cookies, Skittles, whatever, like all these foods that you could buy anywhere across the world, large corporations. And then folk customs in food would be things like things that are endemic to a region. So like sweet potato pie, cheese curds in Wisconsin, key lime pie in Florida. So the food that, if you that's endemic of your culture. And again, folk material is going to diffuse slowly through migration, and popular material culture is going to diffuse rapidly.